Well, that escalated quickly. Joe Biden has agreed to participate, at the very least. Not really start, that's the wrong word. He's agreed to go along and fight World War III over the fate of Taiwan. This happened last night during CNN Town Hall, and the question was simple. If Taiwan is attacked by China, will the U.S. intervene and protect them? And old Joe Biden, Joseph Robinette, always wanting to stand up for his friends in Taiwan, said, oh, hell yeah, we're going to defend Taiwan. And this was news to pretty much everyone. It was news to the Chinese. It was news to the American people. It was news to everybody else, although nobody else matters too much other than the U.S. and China in this context. Because the U.S.'s official policy for many, many decades has been, it's pretty dumb. It's the kind of thing that they would only think up, in the State Department or some D.C. think tank. But it's called strategic ambiguity, which is a nice way of saying the U.S. is not going to say whether or not they'll defend Taiwan, because whether or not the U.S. actually will do that is kind of depend on how they feel when Taiwan is eventually invaded by China. And so the U.S. wants to kind of hold out the possibility. They don't want to commit themselves one way or another to either letting the Chinese have Taiwan, because if they said that, then the Chinese would just go, oh, okay, well, that's good to know, and we'll just go and invade Taiwan and take it over. And at the same time, the U.S. doesn't want to be committed to actually defend Taiwan in a war. They want the best of both worlds. They want the threat of starting World War III, or engaging in World War III, fighting China, destroying the planet in a thermonuclear war. They want that deterrent, yes, but they don't want to actually have to fight and wage World War III if the Chinese, despite that deterrent, say, you know what, no, we're going to take our chances and invade Taiwan anyway. That's the point of strategic ambiguity. What Biden just came out last night is he said, oh, yeah, nukes? No, who cares? Yeah, I'm going to nuke Beijing. Yeah, we're going to destroy the planet. But I'll be damned if I let Mr. Xi celebrate and take a picture in front of the Eiffel Tower in Taipei, or I guess it'd be Taipei 101, kind of like an analog to Hitler taking a picture in front of the Eiffel Tower when they conquered France. Now, this is a pretty big deal. I don't think any president of the United States has ever actually said this. Has said, yeah, we're willing to go to war with China. Even back when, China was a weak backwater, you didn't have U.S. presidents coming out and saying, we're gonna, hey, China, don't invade Taiwan, because we'll come in and we'll beat you down. No president has ever wanted to commit themselves to that, because that would be a huge war. Even back before China had nukes, when China was just a fledgling communist state, they were just at the tail end of the Chinese Civil War. They had suffered World War II, which, for those of you who don't know, the Second Sino-Japanese War, which overlaps with World War II, is a part of World War II, was actually going on for quite a few years before Hitler invaded Poland when we traditionally think of the beginning of World War II, 1939. And so China had been at war constantly for all through the 30s and the 40s, and then you come into the 50s when the Korean War is going on, and the U.S. is just trying to push the communists back into North Korea and keep them there, and set up the DMZ so that South Korea can be non-communist controlled. General MacArthur wanted to keep going all the way to Nanking, as it was known back then. I don't know exactly when the communists renamed it Beijing, or why. I'm not sure what those words mean in Chinese. But I believe back in the day it still would have been called Nanking, or was it Peking? I always get those mixed up. It's tough, these Chinese names that change all the time. This is a problem when you have cultural revolutions and they keep changing the names of things. So, we have this problem here in the U.S. And so getting back to MacArthur, MacArthur said, you know what, no, we need to just snuff out all this communism while we're at it. We need to take out Mr. Kim in Pyongyang. We need to whack him, take over all of Korea, and we need to take out Mao in China and hand China back to Chiang Kai-shek, presumably, who at that time had, ascended as the leader of only Taiwan. He used to rule Taiwan and all of China. Lost that civil war against Mao. But even back then, the President of the United States, Harry S. Truman, who was not afraid of dishing out a lot of force. Oh, wait, no, it wasn't Truman, was it? Gosh, now I'm forgetting things. Was it Eisenhower by then? No, it might have still been Truman. I'm sorry, I get, there's so many things going back and forth all the day, I can mix up little details like that, but I'm pretty sure it was Truman. Who fired MacArthur, the guy, Truman, the guy who dropped nukes on Japan, the only world leader in human history to nuke human beings, civilians, untold thousands of people wiped out in an instant, and then, many more died over the years from radiation poisoning. That guy said, you know what, no, taking on China, that's beyond the pale for me. We're not going to cross that Rubicon. Or in this case, it wasn't the Rubicon. It was, what's that river that divides Korea from China? It would have been a great line if I'd known that, because it fits with the Rubicon analogy perfectly. He did not want to cross that river. He didn't even want to consider it, and so he fired MacArthur. That has been pretty much consistent with the views of every U.S. president, all the way up through Joe Biden. Nobody was going to commit to going to war with China. China's all the way across the world, and they have so many people. But of all folks, it was finally Joe Biden who has committed himself to going to war with China. China Joe, Beijing Biden, is the one who was publicly the most aggressive president when it comes to communist China. Now, right after this, the White House had to come out and contradict Biden, and I guess the official press releases put out by, White House communications team is supposed to supersede the word of the president himself, even though the, White House communications staff is supposed to, just be a surrogate for the president. That's what they're called. They're surrogates for the president. The word of the president himself should mean much more. But no, constantly we've seen, since Biden got elected, his own communication staff has to come out and run damage control and say, no, don't listen to him. He's an idiot. You should listen to us. And we're saying that strategic ambiguity is all the rage, and that's still what we're into. We are not changing anything. But you know what? I don't think that matters in this case. Because you had the President of the United States on TV say he was going to defend Taiwan. I mean, no amount of statements from the White House communications team can erase that. Now, does that mean that what Biden said is true, though? No. It's just that as far as trying to win the narrative war, you're not going to overcome that. He made the statement. He's the man in charge, we're led to believe. Of course, I don't believe that he's actually in charge, so if it came down to it and China did invade Taiwan, I would be very surprised if, Joe actually got his wish and he said, nope, now it's time to go defend Taiwan. Let's send in the tanks or send in, the aircraft carriers. I do believe that the point of strategic ambiguity, so that the U.S. could threaten for all these years that they were going to defend Taiwan, to scare the Chinese enough so that they would put off invading Taiwan. And they've done that for decades now. The Chinese, could have, right after 1949, said, you know what, no, we've conquered the mainland. Now it's time to go get our big island out there in the Pacific, and we need to take out Chiang Kai-shek. But Chiang Kai-shek, he lived for another 20 or so years, over 20 years after 1949, and he ruled Taiwan, and ever since he died, there have been a number of people who have led Taiwan, And none of them have been members of the Chinese Communist Party. And so the U.S. has bought them a lot of time. But when it comes down to it, when D-Day finally arrives, I sure hope the U.S. is not going to allow World War III to occur. I don't have much respect for the common sense of the people at the highest levels of the U.S. government, but I gotta think, regardless of how, deranged and woke they might be, they have to understand that going to war with another nuclear power is not an option. And so one day, whenever Beijing does decide to launch their war on Taiwan, I think that the U.S. will hem and haw an awful lot and say, oh my gosh, we don't recognize this, just like they did with Crimea and all this nonsense. Although Crimea was a very very different situation, since the people in Taiwan very clearly don't want to be a part of China. I think that's pretty certain. It's not like there's just a Muslim minority group in Taiwan who says, you know what, these folks in Beijing, they don't speak for me. Like what we had, the dynamic in Crimea with the Tatars or Tartars. I can never remember. I believe tartar sauce is named after those people. But anyway, Taiwan, very clearly, not like China. The people there do not want to be ruled by Beijing. They've been doing very well for themselves for the past 70 years or so, not being ruled by Beijing. There was no great leap forward famine in Taiwan. They have been very prosperous. They are, a major exporter to the entire world. And yes, they're very important for semiconductors. If Taiwan was gone and all of their stuff was cut off and and they quit producing things, that would be very bad for us. But you have to remember, we trade a lot with China as it is. It's not like if China invades Taiwan, they're not going to, they say, oh, well, we would lose all the semiconductors in Taiwan. It's like, well, we trade with communist China as it is. So that would keep up. The Chinese wouldn't just cut off all of the semiconductors from Taiwan and say, no, we're not going to trade with the rest of the world anymore. China wouldn't do that. I mean, if they did that, they could do that already and cripple the U.S. economy by saying, oh, we're going to not export anything more to the U.S. anymore. We don't want to do that. They don't need to cut off our semiconductors. They can cut off anything because everything that we have here is made in China. For us, what will change is that all those chips that are used in everything, because everything has to be computerized these days, emissions regulations and whatnot. And these chips, instead of saying made in Taiwan on them, they will say made in China. That will be the change. The island of Formosa will be reintegrated into the Middle Kingdom. And I don't like that. I don't like seeing it with Hong Kong either. I mean, Hong Kong was a really cool place for a long time. It was right on the edge, surrounded entirely by communist famine and depravity, and yet they were this shining city on the hill, one of the freest places on the planet. Yeah, is it sad to see China just becoming just another, or Hong Kong becoming just another Chinese city? Yeah, but at the end of the day, we're not going to blow up the planet over it. It's not worth it. Have some priorities here. For me, a priority is avoiding nuclear war. And there's not really anything I can think of that would be worth engaging in nuclear war. Short of the Chinese, wanting to invade the United States, since that is actually where I live. I don't live in Hong Kong or Taiwan, but that I can assure you, the Chinese are not going to be invading the United States. The Chinese have one aircraft carrier? They couldn't make it here. They can't get their people here, and also they have no reason to want to come here. You know why they want to take over Hong Kong and Taiwan? Because Hong Kong and Taiwan were part of the Chinese Empire before Mao took over, and it's just when Mao conquered China, he wasn't able to take over everything. At first, Tibet was not a part of China under Mao, and Mao went in and reconquered it. And he said, no, just because there's a new regime in the imperial city does not mean that the old empire is gone. We will, the communists have always wanted to keep the old Chinese empire together. They just want it to be ruled by the Communist Party instead of by the mandarins and the eunuchs. And so conquering Taiwan and China and Macau is just all about bringing all of their historic territories back under, their flag. Even though their flag isn't yellow with a dragon on it anymore, it's now, red with a bunch of stars and looks totally lifeless and dead. The communist Chinese are not looking for world domination. So, they certainly want to be more powerful than they are now, but they're not going to be they're not going to be invading North America. Hate to break it to you. And since they're not going to do that, I don't see any reason to risk a nuclear war with them. Frankly, even if the Chinese wanted to conquer Japan, I think it would be very unfortunate. I would be very sad by that. I watch a lot of anime, so if the Chinese conquered Japan, that would be very bad for me entertainment-wise. I would lose most of the video games I like because China would censor all these things. But it's still not worth destroying the entire planet. You know what? Life will go on. Although it would be too bad because I would say, you know what? Maybe the U.S. should have let Japan, be its own country and have a big military like it used to. It was one of the most fearsome warrior nations on the planet for a very long time, and Japan was always the one bullying China and subjugating China. Maybe it wasn't such a good idea to completely emasculate and neuter Japan to the point to where they are, very much an impotent nation, in both literally and figuratively. Maybe let Japan have their own independent nuclear deterrent, and then the United States backs away and says, okay, training wheels are off now. Japan, you take care of yourself. And after that's done, let Japan rise up, become Japan should be the imperial power in Asia to balance out China, to, keep them in their box. It's a little late, a little late of a start, but that's the direction we should do. The U.S. Navy should not be dominating the Pacific Ocean. It's a little bit out of the range of American interests. And the hawks will always say, well, who's got to protect international trade and trade routes through Asia, through the Pacific Ocean? We won't have an economy. We'll lose all this stuff that we import. And it's like, you mean all that stuff that we import from China? You're worried that China is going to shut down the trading routes when all the stuff that we're buying is coming from China anyway? So why would they need to shut down the trading routes? If China wanted to disrupt the American economy and international trade, all China would have to say is, we're not going to export stuff to the United States anymore. That's all they'd have to do. They could do it on land. They don't need the ocean. They don't need a navy to do that. So that about sums everything up. I guess I will see you folks back here tomorrow.